The mansion stood high on the hill like a declaration of supremacy, its towering silhouette illuminated by golden floodlights that carved it against the darkening sky.
Please, enjoy the
Imported
evening.
Italian chandeliers shimmered through tall glass windows, scattering light across polished marble floors that seemed to echo with authority at every step. The air inside carried the faint scent of expensive perfume and aged wine, blending with the low murmur of guests who understood that in this house, voices were never raised, only measured. Conversations floated in careful whispers, laughter restrained, as though even sound needed permission to exist within those grand walls. At the center of it all moved the hostess, the Mafia wife. She descended the sweeping staircase slowly, diamonds cascading down her neck and wrists, each stone catching the light like fragments of frozen lightning. Her gown clung perfectly, tailored to announce both wealth and control. This was her annual gathering, an event whispered about for months. It was not merely a party. It was a performance of dominance. Politicians arrived to secure protection. Business tycoons came seeking favor. Celebrities attended to remain relevant. In her presence, alliances were formed and futures were decided. Her smile never reached her eyes. It was cold, rehearsed, and precise. Every compliment she offered carried calculation. Every touch of her hand lingered just long enough to remind others of their dependence. She obsessed over status, the brands, the bloodlines, the subtle codes of old money society that she had married into but never truly felt accepted by. Beneath her polished exterior hid a quiet insecurity, a fear that she was still being evaluated, still being measured. Across the ballroom, a maid moved silently between tables, polishing silverware until it gleamed. She was quiet, observant, nearly invisible in her plain uniform. No one noticed her until the Mafia wife did. Watching her for a moment, the hostess's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smirk. An idea had begun to form. The afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows, casting a warm glow over crystal flutes filled with pale gold champagne. The Mafia wife reclined gracefully on a velvet settee, surrounded by her circle of carefully selected socialites, women draped in designer silk and entitlement. Their laughter rose and fell like rehearsed music, light but sharp at the edges. Conversation drifted toward status, as it often did. People forget their place these days. One woman sighed dramatically, adjusting the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Even the staff start walking as if they belong. Another scoffed. Comfort is dangerous. Give them an inch, and they imagine they're equals. A ripple of knowing laughter circled the group. The Mafia wife tilted her head slightly, her cold smile appearing as if summoned on command. She sipped her champagne, eyes scanning the room until they settled on the maid quietly arranging fresh flowers near the far wall. The contrast was almost poetic, the simple uniform against a sea of couture. "Oh, I have an idea," the wife murmured, placing her glass down with deliberate softness. She raised her voice just enough. "You there? Come here." The room quieted in anticipation. The maid approached calmly, hands folded neatly in front of her. Her expression was composed, neutral, giving nothing away. With exaggerated sweetness, the Mafia wife gestured toward the group. "We're hosting quite the event tonight," she said lightly. "Why don't you join us? We're something fabulous." A silence hung for half a second before restrained laughter broke out. It wasn't loud. These women prided themselves on subtle cruelty, but it was unmistakable. Eyes gleamed with amusement. They were already imagining the spectacle, a maid out of place, drowning in borrowed glamour. The maid's face did not crack. Not a flicker of embarrassment surfaced. She paused, just briefly, as if weighing something far deeper than the words themselves. Then she nodded once. "Of course, ma'am," she replied evenly. The Mafia wife leaned back, satisfied. She believed she had just secured the evening's entertainment, a harmless humiliation to amuse her elite guests. By sunset, whispers had traveled through the mansion and beyond. The staff exchanged curious glances. Invited guests chuckled quietly upon hearing the story. Everyone anticipated the Maid show. Meanwhile, The maid walked back to her modest quarters at the edge of the estate. She closed the door softly behind her. There was no shame in her eyes, only thought. The moment the door to her small quarters closed, the silence shifted. The softness left her shoulders. The quiet humility she wore like part of her uniform dissolved, and her spine straightened with natural authority. The timid maid, who kept her gaze lowered, no longer existed within these four walls. She knelt beside her narrow bed and reached underneath, fingers brushing against the concealed latch hidden behind loose floor paneling. With careful precision, she pulled out a sleek black suitcase, far too refined to belong to a household servant. The metal clasps clicked open softly. Inside lay a different one. Neatly organized legal documents filled one side, stamped and notarized across multiple countries. Bank transfers, property holdings, trust agreements, all bearing one familiar surname, hers. Beneath them rested a velvet garment bag, deep emerald in color, its fabric thick and luxurious. Tucked into the inner pocket was a photograph of a powerful man in a tailored suit, his expression sharp yet warm, one protective hand resting on the shoulder of a much younger version of her. Her father. To the world, he had been a financial architect, a genius who structured the hidden foundations of vast criminal empires. He built fortunes quietly, invisibly, ensuring money flowed like water without a trace. But brilliance came with danger. Years ago, he had vanished without explanation. No body, no confession, only silence and sealed accounts. Officially, his assets were frozen. Unofficially, they had been waiting. She had taken the position in this mansion deliberately. Not out of desperation, not out of poverty, but because threats of financial irregularities led here. She had followed whispers, traced transactions, endured invisibility for answers. Every polished glass, every overheard conversation, every locked office had been part of her investigation. Her fingers moved to the velvet garment bag. Slowly, she unzipped it. The dress shimmered even in the dim light. Custom couture, hand-stitched silk woven with rare diamonds, so delicately embedded they appeared like stardust trapped in fabric. It had once been auctioned in a private European sale, rumored to have belonged to royalty displaced by scandal. $2 million, purchased anonymously months ago. She had been waiting for the right moment. The invitation upstairs had not been humiliation. It was timing. She rose and carried the dress toward the mirror mounted on the wall. For a long moment, she simply stared at her reflection, the maid and the heiress overlapping in glass. Then slowly she smiled. The transformation had already begun. By nightfall, the estate glowed like a jewel against the dark horizon. A procession of luxury cars curved up the long private driveway, sleek black sedans, rare European sports models, chauffeurs stepping out in crisp uniforms to open doors for their distinguished passengers. Flashing cameras captured every arrival at the gates, invited media carefully, selected to document prestige, not scandal. Inside, champagne towers rose in glittering pyramids, crystal glasses stacked with mathematical precision as golden liquid cascaded from the top tier like liquid sunlight. A live orchestra played softly from the balcony above, violins weaving through the air with controlled elegance. The Mafia wife made her entrance precisely on schedule. She descended the sweeping staircase as if the entire evening had been constructed for this single moment. Diamonds shimmered at her throat and wrists, her gown sculpted to perfection. Conversations paused, heads turned, applause fluttered lightly through the ballroom. She acknowledged it all with that familiar, measured smile. Cool, superior, untouchable. Clusters of guests leaned toward one another, whispering behind manicured hands. Is it true? She actually invited the maid? This should be entertaining. Anticipation crackled beneath the refined atmosphere. It was the kind of tension that hid behind polished etiquette, people pretending sophistication while secretly craving spectacle. Then the grand doors of the entrance opened again. The orchestra faltered. A hush fell across the room, so suddenly it felt orchestrated. She stepped inside. Silk flowed around her like liquid moonlight. the fabric catching every glimmer from the imported Italian chandeliers overhead. Diamonds embedded within the gown scattered light in brilliant flashes, refracting across marble floors and mirrored walls. The dress did not simply shine. It commanded attention, bending the room's focus toward it. Her posture was flawless. Shoulders back, chin lifted, each step measured and unhurried. There was no trace of the invisible servant who once moved silently along the walls. Her expression remained calm, controlled, almost serene, as though she had expected this exact reaction. Fashion insiders were the first to recognize it. A man near the Champagne Tower inhaled sharply. "That's the Valmont Royale piece." Another voice stumbled. "It sold for $2 million." The whispers spread like wildfire. Eyes widened, mouths parted, phones subtly lowered instead of raised. This was no borrowed fantasy, no costume. This was authenticity stitched in silk and stone. At the top of the staircase, the Mafia wife stopped breathing for half a second. Her smile trembled, cracked. Confusion flickered behind her carefully painted composure. The joke had shifted. The script had changed without her permission. Without a word being spoken, the power in the room tilted. And suddenly, everyone was staring, not with amusement, but with awe. She did not hesitate. She did not falter. While the room struggled to rearrange its assumptions, she moved forward with steady grace, the silk of her gown whispering against the marble floor. Each step carried quiet authority, as though she had always belonged at the center of such rooms. Conversations parted around her. Near the Champagne Tower, a distinguished older man, an international investor known for moving markets with a single signature, straightened visibly. Instead of dismissing her, he inclined his head with unmistakable respect. "Good evening, Miss Laurent," he said clearly. The name struck the room like a dropped glass. A ripple of confusion spread through the guests. Laurent? The maid? Several faces turned toward one another, recalculating. The investor stepped aside slightly, as if acknowledging Ray. She offered him a composed nod before turning to face the crowd. "My apologies for the surprise," she began, her voice calm, yet carrying effortlessly through the ballroom. "It seems I've been introduced to you under simplified circumstances." A few uneasy laughs died quickly. "I am the sole legal heir to an international portfolio built over decades," she continued. "Assets diversified across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. Holdings that were frozen after my father's sudden disappearance." A murmur swelled. "My father was not merely an accountant," she said carefully. "He was the financial architect behind several empires. Empires that thrived, until betrayal fractured them." Her gaze lifted briefly toward the balcony. "For years, I have been gathering proof. Quietly, patiently." The Mafia wife's grip tightened around the railing above. Then came the twist. She turned slightly, looking directly at the hostess. "I must thank you," she said with a gentle, almost gracious smile. "Your invitation ensured that every influential figure connected to those financial trails is present here." Before confusion could settle, the massive screens along the ballroom walls flickered to life. Gasps replaced whispers. Bank transfers illuminated the room in cold digital light. Offshore accounts traced through shell companies. Transaction timelines connected like constellations of corruption. Names appeared, subtle at first, then undeniable. Faces paled. Champagne glasses were lowered. On the balcony, the Mafia husband's expression shifted from irritation to realization. He scanned the data rapidly, recognizing patterns only insiders could fully comprehend. This was not a performance. This was prosecution. The orchestra had fallen completely silent. No one moved. The party transformed into something unrecognizable, a silent courtroom without a judge. Beyond the tall iron gates of the estate, headlights approached slowly. Authorities entered without sirens. Quietly, the shift in atmosphere was immediate and violent, though no one raised their voice. Panic did not explode. It seeped. Guests who moments ago had been sipping champagne with amused anticipation now stared at glowing screens in disbelief. Phones began vibrating almost simultaneously, sharp digital interruptions cutting through the suffocating silence. Some answered in hurried whispers. Others declined calls, their faces drained of color. Security personnel stationed near the entrances exchanged uncertain glances. Earpieces crackled. Hands hovered near concealed weapons, unsure whether this was a threat to protect against, or a storm already inside the walls. At the top of the staircase, the Mafia wife finally found her voice. "This is absurd," she snapped, descending one step, then another. Fabricated nonsense. A desperate attempt for attention. But the authority that once anchored her tone had vanished. The sharpness now sounded brittle. Forced. Below, the maid, no, the heiress, remained perfectly still. Her expression did not harden. She did not smirk. She simply watched as the evidence continued to unfold across towering screens. Offshore accounts mapped in precise detail. Shell corporations connected through coded transfers. Stolen assets rerouted over years, disguised beneath layers of legitimacy. Dates aligned with her father's disappearance. Signatures appeared, digital, undeniable. A collective murmur rippled through the elite crowd. On the balcony, the Mafia husband descended quickly, his composed mask cracking under pressure. He moved toward her with urgent calculation. "We can discuss this privately," he said in a low voice meant only for her. "Name your price." But there was nowhere private left to hide. Too many eyes, too many witnesses, investors, officials, rivals. Every influential guest who once benefited from proximity now understood the risk of association. Subtly, almost instinctively, the crowd began to shift away from the staircase. No dramatic exits, no confrontations, just inches of space widening into clear distance. Champagne glasses were set down. Conversations ceased. A brutal social exile happening in real time. The Mafia wife noticed. For the first time, she stood alone. Her gaze flickered around the ballroom. The same room where she once commanded admiration, now reflecting avoidance. Her joke, crafted for amusement, had summoned this moment. She had gathered the witnesses herself. She had created the stage. And now she stood at its center, exposed. The heavy front doors opened once more. Measured footsteps echoed against marble. Authorities entered with calm precision. They approached the base of the staircase where she remained frozen, diamonds still glittering. No longer symbols of power, but evidence waiting to be catalogued. Outside the estate gates, the quiet night erupted into controlled chaos. News vans lined the once exclusive driveway. Satellite dishes rising like metallic flowers under the dark sky. Flashing red and blue lights replaced the warm chandelier glow that had bathed the ballroom only an hour earlier. Reporters spoke urgently into microphones. Their voices carried live across networks hungry for scandal. Cameras zoomed toward the grand entrance, capturing silhouettes moving behind towering glass doors. The fortress of power had become a spectacle. Inside, the atmosphere was unrecognizable. The orchestra had long since stopped. Champagne towers stood untouched, their sparkle now hollow. Guests who once thrived on proximity to influence gathered in tight clusters, whispering in careful tones. Who is she really? How long was she planning this? An heiress working a staff. The mysterious transformation unsettled them more than the arrests. Power, they realized, had been standing quietly beside them all along, dressed in a servant's uniform. At the center of the room, she remained composed. Slowly, deliberately, she slipped off her satin gloves. The gesture was small, almost delicate, yet symbolic. A shedding of disguise. The final layer between the role she had played and the truth she no longer needed to hide. She did not raise her voice. She did not gloat. She did not even glance toward the woman who had tried to humiliate her. There was no revenge in her expression, only closure. The contrast was undeniable. Where cruelty had once performed for applause, dignity now stood effortless and unshaken. As murmurs swirled around her, she spoke one final sentence, calm but resonant enough to carry across the marble hall. Respect is not inherited. It is earned. No one challenged her. No one laughed. With measured steps, she turned toward the exit. Authorities parted slightly to allow her passage. Cameras outside shifted direction, sensing the true center of gravity had changed. She walked through the doors not as entertainment, not as a servant, but as a woman who had redefined power without ever needing to shout. And the room watched her leave in silence. Weeks later, the headlines were impossible to ignore. Financial networks dissected the collapse of a criminal empire once thought untouchable. Newspapers detailed frozen accounts, seized properties, and testimonies from insiders who had quickly chosen cooperation over loyalty. Commentators called it one of the most sophisticated internal exposures in recent history. What had begun as a glittering social event was now studied as a calculated dismantling of corruption. The mansion on the hill no longer glowed at night. Its gates remained closed, its marble halls silent. Without the constant parade of luxury cars and whispered alliances, it seemed smaller, like a monument to arrogance rather than power. The chandeliers still hung from painted ceilings, but their light felt dimmer, stripped of influence. As for the woman once dismissed as invisible, her name now appeared in a very different context. Public records confirmed her status as the rightful heir to a vast international portfolio. Yet instead of reclaiming wealth with spectacle, she redirected it with intention. Within weeks, she announced the launch of worker protection programs designed to ensure fair wages, legal safeguards, and safe working conditions for domestic staff and laborers often overlooked. She funded legal reform initiatives aimed at increasing transparency in financial investigations, determined that betrayal would no longer hide behind complexity. Scholarships were established in her father's name, providing educational opportunities for underprivileged young women with ambitions larger than their circumstances. She did not hold press conferences dripping in triumph. She did not retaliate publicly against those who had mocked her. She chose something far more powerful. She rebuilt. Humiliation can wound, but it is fleeting. Dignity endures. The Mafia wife wielded her wealth and status as weapons, aiming to belittle and entertain herself at another's expense. The Maid, however, moved with patience, foresight, and quiet confidence, turning invisibility into strategy and mockery into opportunity. In a world consumed by appearances and titles, true power lies not in what others bring, but in the unwavering understanding of one's own worth. She did not seek revenge, nor did she need to. She simply claimed her place. She was invited as a joke, but she left as a legend.